The photograph was found in a box of old fair ribbons, the kind once handed out at county shows for best livestock, best pie, or the straightest row of corn. The box had been sitting in the attic of a farmhouse in central Nebraska for nearly a century, its wood darkened with age and the faint scent of dust and linseed oil seeping through the grain. When the box was opened, the ribbons crumbled like leaves, but beneath them lay a single photograph. It was small, printed on thick, uneven paper, its surface silvered at the edges from time and air. 4 figures stared out from it, arranged in careful order before a painted backdrop of wheat and sky. The father, broad-shouldered, sat in the center. The mother stood to his left, her hand light upon his shoulder. 2 children flanked them, a girl no older than 8, a boy nearly grown. The family looked complete, but the longer one looked, the less true that seemed. The composition was wrong, the balance slightly off, as though a 5th figure had been removed from the frame. Between the father's chair and the boy's arm was an open space just wide enough for someone small to have stood. It drew the eye, a pocket of emptiness that unsettled without reason. Pinned to the father's vest was a ribbon, bright once, now faded to a pale ghost of blue. The words printed upon it were still legible. County Fair, 1910, Holt County. Beneath that, in a looping hand, someone had written in ink, Samuel Jr. The archivist who found it turned the photo over. The back was blank. No names, no notes, only the faint indentations left by a pen that had pressed too hard against the front. He placed it under a lamp and tilted it slightly. The light caught the impression of another line, faint but visible. He wouldn't stand still. The archivist frowned. The handwriting was the same as the one on the ribbon. That night, in the county's small historical office, a room that smelled of books and heat and old varnish, he examined the photograph again. The fairgrounds from that year were well documented. A Ferris wheel brought from Omaha, a tent of curiosities from Kansas City, and a temporary photography booth run by a man named William Barrow. Barrow's booth had been popular, 5 cents for a portrait, 3 for a tintype, extra for color retouching. He'd taken dozens of family photographs that summer. Only one, however, mentioned a missing child. The archivist found the record in an old newspaper clipping from August 1910, a short piece, wedged between fair results and an advertisement for patent medicine. Local boy injured in accident. During the fair's closing day, young Samuel Thompson, age 9, was struck by a runaway horse near the exhibition tent. Witnesses report the boy survived the initial injury but succumbed later that evening. He read it twice. The surname matched the fair records. He looked again at the photograph. The father's ribbon read Samuel Jr., but there was no 9-year-old boy in the picture. Only the father, the mother, the older son, and the little girl. He leaned closer. Something about the light caught his attention. Beneath the chair, in the shadow cast by the father's leg, a faint outline, almost imperceptible, curved upward like the edge of a child's shoe. He blinked. It was gone. He rubbed his eyes, telling himself it was only the grain of the photo, the texture of age. But when he held it at an angle again, the shape returned, clearer this time. A small shoe turned slightly inward. He turned off the lamp and left the office early. The next morning, the archivist returned to the photo with fresh eyes and a cup of black coffee. He placed it under natural light this time. The shoe was gone, or perhaps it had never been there. He tried to laugh at himself. Still, he made a note in the file. Possible exposure error, light distortion in lower right quadrant. But later, as he was logging the photograph into the county archive database, he noticed something else. The father's eyes, pale and light-colored, likely blue, didn't quite align. The left one gazed forward. The right seemed slightly off, tilted downward toward the empty space beside him, and the mother's hand, resting on his shoulder, appeared to clutch tighter than before. He pushed his chair back and took a breath. It was absurd, the mind playing tricks after too many hours spent cataloging ghosts of the past. Still, the air in the office felt heavier than usual. He logged the photograph under a temporary title, Unidentified Family, County Fair Booth, Nebraska, 1910. But when he typed the accession number and saved the entry, the cursor blinked once and the program froze. The field labeled Subject auto-filled by itself, Samuel Jr. He stared at the screen. No one else was logged into the system. He deleted the word, saved the record again, and closed the computer. That night he dreamed of the fairgrounds, the heat, the smell of hay and smoke, the sound of calliopes echoing from the midway, and in the dream, he saw the booth exactly as it must have been. A tent draped in striped canvas, a wooden chair on a rug, the flash of the camera bulb burning white. The family stood as they had in the picture, the father straight-backed, the mother composed, the 2 children still. But the boy was there this time. He stood beside his father, his hair combed, his vest too large. He wasn't smiling, though his mouth seemed caught halfway between trying to. His hand rested on the father's sleeve. When the bulb flashed, the boy didn't move. Only afterward did the photographer notice that the ribbon pinned to the father's vest had been blank when they entered the booth. He had written the name himself later, by request, Samuel Jr. The archivist woke before dawn, heart pounding. The image from the dream lingered too clearly, too precisely. He walked to the office as the sun rose, the street still empty, his keys trembling in his pocket. When he reached the file room, he went straight to the drawer where the photograph had been stored. It wasn't there. In its place lay a fair ribbon, blue once, now faded. It bore a handwritten name, Samuel Jr. In the summer of 1910, the fair came to Holt County the way storms came to the plains, sudden, sprawling, and impossible to ignore. Wagons rolled in days before, loaded with tents, timber, and barrels of colored powder for the fireworks. Farmers left their fields early, hitching horses that had never seen so much motion. Wives pressed their dresses and packed sandwiches in wax paper, and children waited for the sound of the calliope to echo across the dust. The Thompsons arrived on the second day. They were known in the county, not rich but respected. John Thompson, the father, was a farmer and a veteran of the Spanish-American War, quiet and steady. His wife, Mary, had a calm face that never gave much away. Their two older children, Thomas and Elsie, had been seen around the fairgrounds earlier that morning, near the livestock tent. But it was their youngest, Samuel Jr., who drew attention. The boy had a voice like laughter caught in wind, restless, curious, unafraid of strangers. He carried a small wooden horse with one wheel missing and asked every vendor if they could fix it. By noon, the family gathered near the exhibition booths. The fair's photographer, a man with a sharp mustache and a sunburned face, had set up a booth beside the ribbon stand. He charged 5 cents for a portrait and an extra penny if you wanted your name written on a fair ribbon. "Step right in," he'd called. "Keep still and you'll live forever." John hesitated. He wasn't a man for pictures, but Mary convinced him. "Just once," she said, "for the children." The photographer adjusted his lens, brushed the dust from the backdrop, and told them where to stand. Mary on the left, the girl by her side, the older boy to the right. John sat in the chair at the center, but Samuel Jr. wouldn't stay still. He darted in and out of the frame, giggling, touching the lamp, trying to peek through the lens. The photographer sighed. "Now, young man, you'll spoil the picture." John reached out a hand. "Samuel, stand here beside me." The boy obeyed, but only for a moment. Then the pony wheel slipped from his fingers and rolled across the booth. He chased after it, ducking under the tripod. The camera flashed. The family blinked in the light. When they looked around, the boy was gone. At first, no one panicked. The fairgrounds were a maze of tents and laughter, and children vanished and reappeared every hour. John stepped outside, shading his eyes. He saw only the movement of crowds, women in white parasols, boys with candy apples, the spinning blur of the Ferris wheel in the sun. He called his son's name. No answer. By evening, the fair had dimmed into lantern light. The air smelled of oil and sugar, and the laughter had thinned. John and Mary searched every tent, their voices hoarse, their shoes caked in dust. The sheriff joined them just before nightfall, lanterns swinging from his hand. Near the livestock pens, they found a hat, a small straw hat with a broken band. Beside it, a wheel from a wooden horse. Witnesses later said they saw a child running near the horse stables that afternoon, laughing as he chased something through the tall grass. No one remembered seeing him after that. The following day, word spread fast. A boy had been trampled by a frightened horse near the edge of the fairgrounds. The animal had broken free when fireworks startled it. The boy was alive when they found him, breathing, though faintly. His father carried him home in silence. He died that night before the doctor arrived. The house fell quiet after that. John worked the fields without speaking. Mary stopped sewing. The children did their chores, but no one mentioned the fair again. Weeks passed. The crops yellowed early that year. The neighbors said it was the heat. In September, a letter arrived from the fair photographer. He apologized for the delay and included a small envelope with the family's portrait inside. John stared at it for a long time. The picture was clear: the mother, the girl, the older boy, and himself. But the space beside his chair was empty. He turned it over. Written on the back in the photographer's hurried script were the words, "He wouldn't stand still." That night he sat at the kitchen table with a lamp burning low. The ribbon that had come with the picture lay beside his hand, pale blue, smooth, perfectly folded. Across its face, in ink dark as blood, was a name, Samuel Jr. Mary came down the stairs, her steps soft. "You shouldn't keep it," she said. "It isn't right." He didn't look up. "It's the only proof he was ever here." She reached for the ribbon, but he pulled it away. "He's still ours," he whispered. He'll stay with us even if it's just in the picture. From that night on, the photograph never left the house. It hung in the parlor beside the clock, always slightly crooked. When neighbors came to visit, John insisted on showing it. "That's us," he'd say. "All of us." Some of them nodded politely, others frowned, uneasy. There was something about the image that didn't sit right. A faint blurring at the edge of the father's sleeve, a smudge near the rug, a shadow that seemed to rise from the floor like smoke. Years later, their daughter Elsie would tell her own children that she never liked to walk past the picture after dark. Sometimes she said it looked different. Different how? Her children would ask. The space beside Pa's chair, she'd say. Sometimes it wasn't empty. They'd laugh, of course, as children do, but she wasn't joking. One night when she was about 16, she woke to a sound downstairs, the faint shuffle of boots against the wood floor. She thought it was her father, but when she reached the parlor, the lamp was still burning. Her father sat at the table, eyes fixed on the photograph. His hands were trembling. "Pa," she whispered. He didn't turn. On the table lay the blue ribbon. It was wet, as if it had been dipped in water. The ink had run slightly, bleeding into the fibers, but the name was still visible. Samuel Jr. Beside it lay a second ribbon, blank. Her father's voice was thin, almost childlike. He wanted his own. Elsie stepped closer. "Who did?" Her father's eyes flicked toward the picture. "Sam," she swallowed. "Pa, Sam's..." He shook his head sharply. "No, not gone. Never gone." He just wouldn't stand still. The lamp flickered. The clock on the wall ticked loudly, as if to fill the silence. Her father looked back at the photograph. "See?" he said softly. Elsie followed his gaze. There were 5 shadows now, 4 cast by the living, one that didn't belong. The faint outline of a small boy, hat in hand, standing in the space beside the chair. She screamed. When her mother came running, the room was empty. The photograph hung straight on the wall again, the lamplight soft and steady. Only the ribbons remained on the table, one blue, one blank, both damp with something that wasn't water. John never spoke of it again, but every year, on the fair's anniversary, he would sit in that same chair with the photograph on his lap and the ribbons folded in his hands. He didn't say a word, and sometimes when the evening light fell just right, Mary swore she saw the 5th shadow again, stretching long across the parlor floor, a small shape, standing perfectly still, watching the family that had tried so hard to stay complete. Time, in rural Nebraska, moves differently. It doesn't rush or stretch, it circles. The seasons turn, crops rise and fall, and people live by what they can hold, by what doesn't change too much when you look away. But for the Thompsons, time had stopped in 1910. The photograph hung on the parlor wall for decades, the only thing that seemed untouched by the sun. The wallpaper behind it faded, the clock beneath it rusted, and the floorboards warped from heat and rain. But the image never aged. The faces remained as they had been that day at the fair. The father upright, the mother composed, the girl small and silent, the older boy just at the edge of a man's shadow. And between them, that impossible stillness, a space that drew the eye and refused to let it go. When the older boy, Thomas, married in 1921, he asked his mother for the photograph. "It should stay in the family," he'd said. Mary hesitated, glancing toward the wall where it hung. "Your father would want it here," she murmured. John had passed the winter before, quietly, in his sleep, hands folded, the blue ribbon resting on his chest. The undertaker had asked whether to remove it. Mary said no. "It's his to keep," she'd said. Still, when Thomas pressed again, she relented. She wrapped the photograph in linen and handed it to him along with the remaining ribbon, the one that had always stayed blank. Thomas hung it in his own house above the mantel. His wife, Ellen, disliked it from the start. "They don't look happy," she said once. "Most families smile in their portraits." Thomas smiled faintly. "We're not most families." She didn't ask what he meant. At first, it was only the little things. The sound of the frame rattling softly at night. The faint smell of dust and sweet hay near the fireplace. Once, Ellen thought she saw a flicker, a small motion, on the far right side of the photograph, like the shimmer of heat over dry fields. When she told her husband, he laughed. "You've been staring too long," he said. "It's an old print. The light plays tricks." But the following week, their daughter Ruth came running into the kitchen holding the frame. "Daddy," she said breathlessly, "why did you put another boy in the picture?" Thomas froze. "What boy?" "The one by Grandpa's chair," she said. "He was there this morning, but he's gone now." He took the photograph from her hands. The glass was smudged with fingerprints. "Ruth," he said carefully, "there's no other boy." She looked at him confused, then whispered, "He said his name was Sam." The ribbon fell from the mantel that same night. Neither of them heard it fall. It lay on the floorboards until morning. The pale fabric curled like a sleeping thing. When Ellen picked it up, the name was there, faint, written in shaky hand, but there. Samuel Jr. She dropped it as though it had burned her. Thomas refused to believe it. He told himself he'd written the name years ago and forgotten. He told himself it was ink bleeding from another surface. He told himself many things. But when he went to put the ribbon away, he found the drawer already open. The second ribbon, the blank one, was gone. That night, he dreamed of the fair again. He saw the booth, the painted wheat field, the rug, the wooden chair. His father sat there, staring straight ahead. His mother stood by him motionless, and the boy, Sam, was there too, hat in hand, head tilted just slightly. Thomas tried to speak, but no sound came. The boy looked at him, his lips parting in a small, careful smile. Then he raised his hand and pointed, not at Thomas, but at something behind him. When Thomas turned, he saw another photograph pinned to the booth's canvas wall. The same family, in the same pose, except that in this one, Thomas wasn't there at all. He woke gasping. The smell of hay lingered in the air. When he went downstairs, the photograph on the mantel was crooked. The space beside his father's chair looked wider. By the time the Depression came, the Thompsons' farm had been sold and the family scattered. The photograph followed Thomas wherever he went, from Nebraska to Kansas, and finally to a small house outside Des Moines. He couldn't bring himself to throw it away even after Ellen died. "It's part of us," he told Ruth when she came to visit. "It's the only thing that doesn't change." She didn't argue, though she never stayed the night. The house unsettled her. It was too quiet, too heavy with the weight of memory. And the photograph, she swore it looked brighter now, the whites of the dresses sharp as bone. When Thomas passed in 1949, Ruth inherited what little he had: a Bible, a gold pocket watch, and the photograph. The ribbons were nowhere to be found. She kept the picture in a drawer for years, refusing to hang it. But sometimes when the light struck the glass just right, she thought she could see faint lettering at the bottom edge, words she couldn't read completely. He wouldn't stand still. She remarried, moved east, and eventually forgot the photograph altogether. It wasn't until her son Michael was 16 that it appeared again. He found it in a trunk in the basement, wrapped in yellowing newspaper. He brought it upstairs, dusted it, and called out, "Mom, who are these people?" Ruth turned pale. "Put that back," she said. "Why? It's just a picture." She reached for it, but he pulled away. "They look like us," he said quietly. "This one," he pointed to the older boy. "He even has my nose." "Michael," her voice cracked. "Please." He didn't listen. He'd always loved old things, history, the weight of the past. He hung the photograph in his room that night, and for the first time in decades, the ribbon returned. It lay on his desk the next morning, pale and folded, the ink almost invisible. But when the sunlight touched it, the name emerged again, letter by letter, like something breathing through the fabric. Samuel Jr. He didn't tell his mother. He didn't have the chance. 2 nights later, Ruth heard him talking softly in his sleep. At first, she thought it was a dream. Then she heard the words, "It's your turn now." The next morning, the ribbon was gone, and the photograph, though unchanged at a glance, showed something new when she looked closer. The father's hand rested differently now. It was turned outward, palm open, as if reaching toward someone just beyond the frame. Years rolled on. The photograph outlasted everyone. By the time it reached the 1970s, it had no known owner, only a lineage of houses it had passed through, each leaving faint marks on its frame. When it appeared in an antique shop in Omaha in 1976, the dealer noted how pristine it was. "Early century," he said, tapping the glass. "Perfect condition. Families like this don't smile anymore." He placed it near the register. It sold within a week. The buyer was a young woman named Claire. She taught history at a local high school and had a weakness for relics. She loved the photograph instantly. The light, the stillness, the strange sense of grace it held. She hung it in her study, beside her desk. For months it remained just that, a piece of quiet beauty. Until one afternoon, when her nephew came to visit. He was 9 years old. He stopped in front of the photograph, squinting. "Who's the boy?" he asked. "There are 2 boys," she said, smiling. "One older, one younger." He shook his head. "No, the other one, the one behind the chair." She looked closer. There was nothing there, just shadow. That night she dreamed of a county fair, wheat fields, dust, and a booth lined with striped fabric. A camera flashed, blinding her, and from the white glare a boy's voice whispered, "Don't move, you'll blur." She woke with her heart racing. When she looked toward her desk, the photograph had fallen face down. She picked it up, brushing the dust away. There, on the back, written in faint pencil, was a name she didn't recognize: Samuel Jr. The ink was still wet. Over the next weeks, the photograph began to change. The contrast deepened. The backdrop, once a painted wheat field, looked real now, textured, three-dimensional. The eyes of the father caught light differently, reflecting a depth that shouldn't exist in paper. The little girl's hand appeared slightly blurred, as if she had moved. Claire stopped showing the picture to visitors. She thought about throwing it away, but she couldn't. Something about it compelled her to keep it, as though she owed it her attention. And then, one evening, she noticed something she had never seen before. Pinned to the father's chest, clearer than ever, was the ribbon. The name on it was not Samuel Jr. anymore. It was Michael Thompson, her father's name. That was the last straw. She packed the photograph, sealed it in a wooden box, and locked it in the attic. She told herself she would donate it someday, to a museum, a library, anywhere it could be someone else's responsibility. But weeks later, when the box was opened by a new tenant after she moved out, it was empty. Only a faint trace of blue fabric remained, pressed flat against the wood like something that had once breathed. And somewhere, perhaps still in Nebraska, in an archive drawer mislabeled and forgotten, lies a single blue ribbon, faded, creased, with a child's name written over and over again in the same uncertain hand. Samuel Jr., Samuel Jr., Samuel Jr. Every letter slightly different, every name slightly older, and if you listen closely in that silent room, long after the lights go out, you might hear the faint rustle of paper, as if someone were still standing very still, waiting for the photograph to be taken again. It was autumn when the photograph returned again, not through family inheritance, not through memory, but through a misfiled box in the Nebraska Historical Society's archives, a building of marble and silence, where everything forgotten eventually waits to be rediscovered. The archivist who found it was new. Her name was Anna. She had taken the position after finishing her graduate thesis on early rural photography, and she loved the smell of cellulose and paper, the quiet hum of the temperature regulators that kept history from fading completely. She had spent the week cataloging photographs from the early 1900s, most of them unremarkable. Fairs, churches, children lined up before schools that no longer stood. But one morning, while checking a box labeled Miscellaneous, Holt County, she noticed something unusual. The photograph inside was dated 1910. It showed a family of four, father, mother, son, daughter, standing before a painted backdrop. The father wore a county fair ribbon. The print was faded but remarkably well preserved. She smiled, lifting it carefully by the edges. Perfect example of regional portraiture, she murmured. But then she looked closer. Something about it made her chest tighten. At first she thought it was the composition. The subjects were centered, but their eyes weren't, as if they were aware of something beyond the frame. The mother's hand, resting on the father's shoulder, seemed too tense. The boy's gaze wasn't directed at the lens, but slightly off to the right, toward an empty space. And there, beneath the father's chair, a faint shape, a shoe, a small one. Anna adjusted the lamp. The detail vanished, then reappeared. The surface shimmered faintly like breath on glass. She turned the photo over. The back was blank, but pressed faintly into the paper were words that had been written with heavy hand, visible only in relief. He wouldn't stand still. She sat back, a chill crawling through her. It wasn't just the words, it was the feeling, as though the air around her had thickened. The archive lights flickered, just once. She logged the photograph into the database. County Fair Booth, Nebraska 1910, unknown family. When she tried to save the file, the system froze. The field for subject autofilled by itself. Samuel Jr. Anna frowned. She deleted the entry and typed it manually. The same name reappeared. She shut down the computer. Over the next few days, she couldn't stop thinking about the photograph. She told herself it was professional curiosity, a strange anomaly, nothing more. Yet every time she passed the file cabinet, she found her eyes drawn to the drawer that held it. Finally, one evening after hours, she gave in. The building was silent, except for the hum of the air system. She took out the photograph and placed it beneath the lamp again. For the first time, she noticed that the ribbon pinned to the father's chest looked unusually vivid, as if it hadn't aged at all. She leaned closer. The name written on it was still legible, Samuel Jr. She blinked. Something changed. The ink glistened, faintly wet as though freshly written. Her breath caught. She set the photo down quickly. The metal of her desk lamp felt hot against her fingers. She turned off the light and sat in the dark for a while, telling herself she was imagining it. But when she left the room, she could swear she heard a faint rustle, the sound of fabric brushing against paper. She didn't look back. That night, Anna dreamed of the fairgrounds. The sky was copper and dust. The wind carried the scent of hay and sugar. People passed by in clothes that seemed half-remembered, faces blurred, voices indistinct. And then, the booth, the striped canvas, the wooden chair, the rug on the dirt floor. She stepped closer, heart pounding. The family was there. The father, the mother, the boy, the girl. They stood perfectly still, eyes fixed not on her, but on the space beside her. The camera flashed. When her vision cleared, there was someone new among them. A fifth figure, a small boy in a straw hat standing beside the chair. His face was half in shadow, but his eyes were light, too light. He smiled. Anna woke with a gasp, her pillow damp with sweat. The taste of dust clung to her mouth. When she reached the archives the next morning, the photograph was gone. She checked every drawer, every folder. Nothing. Only a single ribbon lay on her desk. Pale blue, smooth, the name written in perfect, careful ink. Anna Thompson. She didn't go home that night. She couldn't. The world outside the archives felt wrong. Too bright, too loud, as though reality had thinned. She sat in her car for hours, staring at the empty parking lot. When she finally went inside again, the photograph was there, lying face up on her desk. Only now there were 5 people in it: the father, the mother, the son, the daughter, and a small boy with a hat. He stood in the space where Shadow used to be, and he was looking at her. Days passed in silence. Anna didn't tell anyone. She couldn't explain what she had seen, and even if she tried, who would believe her? Instead, she studied the photograph as though it were a puzzle she could solve. She scanned it, magnified it, cross-referenced the emulsion patterns. Nothing unusual. Yet the boy remained. She printed the scan. The boy was still there. She inverted the image, changed the contrast. Nothing removed him. The only difference was his expression. Every time she looked, it changed slightly. A hint of sadness one day, a faint smile the next. Once she swore she saw his lips move. The building's custodian, Mr. Greer, noticed the change in her. "You working late again?" he asked one night, mopping near her office door. She nodded absently. He leaned on the mop. "That room's strange after dark. Air feels heavy. You feel it?" She looked up, startled. "What do you mean?" He scratched his chin. "I've worked here 20 years. Every few months that drawer opens on its own. Always the same one. County Fair booth." She froze. "You've seen the photograph?" He frowned. "What photograph?" "The one from 1910. He shook his head. "No picture. Just the ribbon. Always the ribbon." "What ribbon?" He gave her a puzzled look. "Didn't you find it yet? It's in there now." She stood, heart hammering, and crossed to the drawer. Slowly, she pulled it open. Inside, lying neatly atop the folders, was the ribbon. The handwriting had changed again. "He's waiting." That night, she didn't dream. She didn't need to. When she arrived the next morning, the photograph was waiting on her desk, propped against her chair. But something was different. Not in the image, but in the glass itself. It reflected her face faintly, distorted by the curvature of the frame. Behind her reflection stood the 5 figures. She turned, trembling. The room was empty. When she faced the photograph again, the boy was closer. The ribbon on the father's chest gleamed with wet ink, and beneath the printed name a new one had appeared, smaller, written in the corner of the ribbon as though added after. Anna. She quit the archives that week. Her resignation letter was short, written in tight, uneven lines. She left the key on the desk and walked out before dawn. The photograph was never seen again. But months later, a janitor cleaning the basement found a ribbon under a vent. Pale blue, torn at one end, the ink nearly gone. When held under light, the name appeared faintly in overlapping layers. Samuel Jr. Michael, Anna, and below them, in handwriting that seemed to belong to none of them, yours. The photograph is now part of a digital archive, cataloged but never displayed. When the image is opened on a screen, it loads slowly, as though resisting visibility. And in some versions, if the brightness is lowered and the contrast turned just right, a 5th figure becomes visible in the corner, a small boy, standing where no exposure should have registered light. He looks toward the viewer, his eyes soft, expectant. Pinned to his chest is a ribbon, blank and waiting. There is a peculiar stillness in photographs taken before the world learned how to move, before color, before flashbulbs, before people learned to smile for the camera. They seem to breathe differently, slower, heavier, as if the air of those moments never really escaped the frame. The photograph from the fair became one of those moments. It outlived its subjects, its maker, its century. It traveled quietly, without will or purpose, crossing hands, homes, and generations. Yet somehow, wherever it went, it carried the same small weight, that name, that ribbon, that absence. What began as a simple portrait in a county fair booth had turned into something else, a record not of who was seen, but of who remained unseen. In the late winter of 2024, a digital restoration project in Omaha scanned thousands of photographs for the state archive. Among them, mislabeled and nearly unreadable, was the fair portrait. The technician, a man named David, was 26 years old, recently hired, and meticulous by nature. His task was simple: adjust contrast, repair scratches, and upload the files to the state's new online collection. He scanned the photograph without thinking much. The system recognized the emulsion pattern and displayed the metadata. Year, 1910. Location, Holt County Fair. Subjects, unknown family of 4. He zoomed in, adjusting brightness, then froze. 5 figures. He rubbed his eyes. No, only 4. He adjusted again. 5. He stared for a long time. The 5th figure, small, indistinct, wearing a straw hat, seemed to hover at the edge of the frame. He checked the source image. The figure wasn't there. He turned off the monitor, heart hammering, and stepped away. The hum of the scanner filled the silence, rhythmic, mechanical, indifferent. After a few minutes, he laughed under his breath. Glitch, he said. Artifact. But when he turned the monitor back on, the photograph had changed again. The ribbon on the father's chest now had 2 names written one over the other, each half erased by time. Samuel Jr., David. He leaned closer, trying to understand. The ink shimmered faintly, as though still wet. Then, and later, he would swear he didn't imagine this. The cursor on his screen began to move on its own. The description field filled itself with words. He's looking at you. He unplugged the computer, stumbled back, and nearly knocked over the chair. The monitor went black. But in the glass, for an instant, he saw reflection, not his own, but of a child standing behind him. When he turned, the room was empty. David didn't return to work the next day. The project supervisor assumed illness. When they went to check his workstation, the computer was still off, the scanner light still blinking red. The photograph file had been uploaded automatically at midnight. The file name wasn't the one assigned by the system. It read simply, "Still here." JPEG, and when opened, the photograph appeared almost ordinary. The family as always, the father, mother, daughter, son. But there, behind them, the faint outline of a 5th figure, a boy, eyes pale, straw hat in hand, pinned to his chest, a ribbon, newly written, Samuel Jr. No one knows what became of the original print. Some say it was destroyed after scanning. Some say it was misplaced. But copies exist, shared quietly, posted to forums, sent between amateur historians fascinated by its history, each version slightly different. In one, the father's eyes are darker. In another, the mother's hand seems to tighten on his shoulder. In a few, faint script appears at the bottom edge. He wouldn't stand still. And in every version, if you look long enough, you begin to feel that the air between the figures is not empty. It's dense, heavy, like something still trying to form. One image surfaced online years later, reposted countless times. It was sharper, clearer than any before. The light had been restored, the dust removed. The ribbon was vivid again, but this time, it bore no name. The space beside the father's chair was no longer empty. A boy stood there, still as the others, his expression calm, almost peaceful. The comments under the image were strange. Some people claimed the boy wasn't visible when they first opened the post. Others said they recognized him, that he looked like someone they once knew. One comment read, "My grandmother told me about this picture. She said her father saw it once and never forgot it. She said when you finally see all 5, it means he's found a place." Another replied simply, "I saw the ribbon move. There are no more Thompsons alive today. Their names exist only in ledgers and census records. Their house long gone. Their land divided into fields that grow corn every summer and forget every winter. But sometimes, when the wind is high and the sky glows that same dry gold it did in 1910, people say they hear faint laughter drifting across the fields, the laughter of a boy chasing a wooden horse through the dust, just before the world learned how to move." The photograph itself remains online, buried deep within the archives. And if you open it on a quiet night, when the lights are low and no one else is in the room, you might notice a small detail others miss. A reflection, not in the glass of the frame but in your own screen. Faint, pale, almost human. It stands just behind you, at the edge of your vision. If you turn quickly enough, you'll see nothing. But if you wait a little longer, you might feel it. The air pressing closer, the warmth of a small breath near your ear, and a whisper so soft it feels like memory itself. "Don't move. You'll blur." The image fades. The story ends where it began, with a boy who wouldn't stand still, a family caught between one breath and the next, and a single ribbon that refuses to fade. Some say the photograph is cursed. Others say it's blessed, that it keeps something alive the world has long forgotten. The quiet persistence of memory, the proof that what's been loved never really disappears. And if someday you find yourself staring at an old photograph, one that seems to look back at you, remember this: not every exposure captures light. Some capture time, Some capture what time refuses to let go. If this story found you tonight, don't forget to subscribe to Valeside Stories for more voices from the forgotten corners of history. There's another photograph waiting. It's already appearing on your screen now. Go on, look closely. The fifth figure might be waiting for you too.